Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Rafael Piroman. The battle over the border continues, and now Democrats are crying foul after accusations that the White House was playing politics with the lives of those seeking asylum at our southern border. The Washington Post, quoting Department of Homeland Security officials, said that the administration had considered a plan to bus detainees to sanctuary cities. But lawyers for immigration and customs enforcement rejected the idea, saying it was inappropriate. The Post report goes on to say that the goal of the White House was twofold: to conserve detention space at the border and to, quote, send a message to Democrats. Stephen Miller, a senior policy advisor to President Trump, reportedly discussed the proposal with ICE officials. Specifically targeted in the plan, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's district in San Francisco.
I don't know anything about it, but again, it's just another notion that is unworthy of the presidency of the United States and disrespectful of the challenges that we face as a country, as a people, to address who we are, a nation of immigrants.
The White House initially said the proposal was just a suggestion that was floated and rejected. But in a tweet earlier today, the president said, quote, we are indeed giving strong considerations to placing illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities only. New York is a sanctuary city, but a recent report from Comptroller Scott Stringer revealed some startling statistics, including that deportations have soared 150% as a result of what his office has called racist and xenophobic Trump policies. Comptroller Stringer sat down with Jenna Flanagan to discuss those findings.
We are a sanctuary city. That's how we were all born and raised here, to believe that no matter where our parents and grandparents came from or when they came here, once they got here, they were part of the future of this city. And to see this president now going after and targeting immigrants in New York City, the sanctuary city, is really incredibly problematic and frightening. We did a report that showed that there's an increase of deportations of up to 150% since 2017. We now see that there's an 88% increase in arrests of immigrants. That's not the aspirational city that we want, and we have to come together as a city and use every tool at our disposal to make sure that we protect the immigrants who come to our city and make such an incredible economic contribution. But this report, I think, is something that people should look at when you see what happens when an entire city is targeted by the White House.
A lot of people might push back and say, well, you know, there were a record number of deportations under the Obama administration. So what's making this different?
When you really look at what's going on, you see that there's a 265% increase in the number of immigrants who are just being taken off the streets. They didn't commit a crime, they don't have a criminal record. They're just being targeted because they happen to be immigrants. And then that goes against what a sanctuary city is, because when people come here, we don't target people. We don't separate parents from children. We don't do that stuff. We let people live and let live, and then we build our economy around the strong immigrant city that this is. I like to remind people who get confused about this sometimes that immigrants make a tremendous economic contribution to New York City. They earn $100 billion in income every year. They pay billions of dollars in taxes. They're now in media and culture and business. And this city could not thrive without our immigrants.
Considering the fact that New York was supposed to be a sanctuary city, was, at least according to this report, part of the way that that was supposed to work was that the NYPD was not going to be working with organizations like ICE, et cetera, to aid in these deportations. So how is this accelerated so fast if the NYPD is being hands-off?
The report did not address the NYPD. In this particular report, we have traditionally had a hands-off policy, which I think is very important and critical to remain or continue or hope to be a sanctuary city. But I think the numbers here show that we have to do more, be more vigilant.
You know, New York is such a multicultural city, and yet so much about the immigration debate has focused on, or at least the president's focus has been towards Latinos who might be crossing over the border undocumented, et cetera. What was your report able to find about the kinds or the ethnicity of the immigrants who are actually being targeted and deported?
Well, it's much varied. One thing about ICE, they don't discriminate, they go after everybody. We saw that 20% of the deportations are actually in the Asian community. And that was very surprising because you only think about the Latino community, but people from all different countries are being targeted. This is not just one group of people, but it's a campaign against immigrants in general. And I want to say that the statistic that is just frightening is the one that says that 265% of the deportations are people who just walked down the street, or they went to a court appearance, or they took a child to school. They're doing the right thing, living their lives and contributing to society, and then to be picked off the street in the dead of night or early in the morning, as it's just not the America that we believe it should be.
I also wanted to ask you about Thrive NYC. Now, this was a program or initiative that was started with what seems like the best of intentions, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be how things have shaken out. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think Thrive is an important mental health initiative that can make a difference for the city, and I applaud the mayor and the First Lady. It's something that we continually have to focus on. A lot of the people who are languishing in homeless shelters, for example, are also people who suffer mental illness, and we have to address it. While we're addressing it, and we're spending $850 million addressing it, we also have to examine the books to make sure the money is being spent in the ways that it should be, that we're measuring results. That's my job as controller. I audit everybody, Department of Education, Thrive, homeless shelters. I audit because that's my job. So I have to hold the mayor and his administration accountable. When I focus, I find that they do a better job. When I focus on issues of financial accountability, it's what makes our government strong, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Well, I think financial accountability in government is a great platform to run for mayor on. Is that something?
Well, how about this? It's a great way to honor the commitment I made to people in the city, that I would be an aggressive controller. I would take on the tough fights. I would not be afraid of large corporations or mayoral control or the mayoral government. And I have been an independent steward of our finances, and I take people on because I represent folks in the city who are struggling to get by, and that's the role that I continue to play.
And is that what you believe will help you stand out in the future mayoral race?
You know, that seems to be far away, but as I consider that possible run, the best way that I can show people in the city that I love New York is by doing the job I've been elected to do, and what comes down the road comes down the road.
All right, well, we look forward to following what comes down the road. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.